Hey there, gang. Dave Paulides, K&M Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. Thanks for being here. And still very cold in Montana. We had a few days where it tried to lighten it up a bit, but we're back to snowing, dark days. That's usually the way February is up here. It can be really cold. And we've got some below zeros coming up, so we're going to be huddling up and eating our apple strudel and pastry. Yes, love it. Some of you have been busy, and namely, one person sent me an entire box of Tang, sugar-free, no less. Thank you for the thought. This will come in handy when we go backpacking. And then others of you have sent me an entire series of books. I mean, I've got Unfreedom of the Press by Mark Levin, The 100-Year Marathon, Cops, True Stories of the Paranormal, A Divine Revelation, Heaven and Hell, Satan's Deceptions, The Dumbest Generation. You guys are very thoughtful. Please don't send any more books. I have a stack that are related to our work that I have to get through. I probably have enough books that people have sent me over the years that I could go for 10 years, reading maybe 15 books a year. That's how far behind I am. But I do keep up with the missing people work and the kind of things that we talk about here. So, thank you for your thoughts. I'm humbled that anyone sends me anything. So, now on the missing person front, there's been some interesting things going on. And the most interesting thing to me is I'm on LinkedIn. You people don't know what LinkedIn is. It's a site mainly for people in business. It's like a resume online kind of, and people can look you up and check out your LinkedIn page. Well, every week LinkedIn sends me a list of people who have looked at my page and their background. And usually it's really mundane. Every once in a while I find something that's pretty interesting, and this week was a head turner. So this is my page. This is one of my pages about who's looked at me this week. You see that one? U.S. Department of Justice. Are they coming for me? Yeah, I don't know. What did I do wrong? I don't know. Might be just a fan. But then it says the job titles of your searchers: regulatory specialist, business strategist, author, advertising specialist, and lawyer. A DOJ lawyer sniffing around. Oh boy. Who knows what they're doing here, but... All right. Let's get into some of the letters because they're pretty interesting, in my humble opinion. It's very humble. First one, Dave. Having finished watch the season 2 of Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch, I'm sure we're all aware that the ranch is a gigantic satellite dish. Now the questions: why, whom built, and more importantly, where is it sending information to? Are the Sasquatch beings involved? Are the Watchers from the Bible stories of the builders? This leaves us with a huge amount of questions. Here's a huge thought. What does our government know? Well, let's stop there for a second. So, back when Mr. Bigelow owned the ranch, George Knapp had spent a significant amount of time there. And through Mr. Bigelow and other sources, he met somebody from our government that was at the ranch studying it. The implication being our government really doesn't know much about what's going on. And it was part of a group of government people that were there studying it. So my gut tells me they really don't know too much. I impeccably trust George and what he tells me and what he says, and I'm pretty positive that, like he has implied, they really know very little. I am sure many others want to know about the black ops in our country. We all are aware it exists. Oh, for sure. Next paragraph. My sister from Phoenix called me very excited last night at 12:30 p.m. Herself and grandson were out looking for the dog that had escaped the yard. They witnessed a white object like a spinning top heading towards Superstition Mountains. A huge helicopter was following very closely behind the object. Not one word about this situation on local news this morning. Just something to think about, thanks. Well, almost everybody has a phone. A phone has video capabilities. I wish some people would be taking these videos. But thanks for the note. Next email. I stumbled across your missing 411 documentaries last year and became hooked on your work. Thank you. I've always believed that this world is way more fascinating than we can ever imagine. I can't explain why I've felt so connected to your work, but your soul seems too familiar when I watch you on your YouTube videos. Then I heard we have shared a similar loss. I was 9 months pregnant when my blood clots formed in my placenta, leaving my daughter dead. I had to do a labor delivery and hand her over to a funeral home. Not to compare pain, but I can't even imagine the pain you have experienced losing your son. But I do know this. I've had some mind-blowing signs, I guess you can say, from my daughter, confirming she is with me, and it gives me so much peace. I now live the life she couldn't, and something tells me you have been doing the same for your son. I have no other kids, but I live a simple life, having the time to do plenty of reading and learn from experts like yourself. Oh, trust me, I'm no expert. I'm pretty good at gathering info and putting pieces together, but there are few experts in this field, including me. I'm not one. I hope to see you on Rogan soon, and don't hold your breath. That doesn't appear to be happening. I also hope to meet you one day and look forward to seeing more of your work. It's my goal to buy all of your work. My mom and stepdad have a ranch farm outside of Boise, Idaho, so I figured your Missing 411 Idaho book would be a good place to start. Appreciate it. Thank you. Next letter. Thanks for all your hard work. You are going to find missing people. I found your channel after a family member told me about it. I've watched the movies and have started diving into the books. I'm originally from Minnesota and am currently pursuing a master's degree at Minnesota State. Anyway, I don't want to take up much of your time, so I'll dive into the story I have. There have been multiple times when I've seen things that I can't explain. The first encounter I had happened during the winter of 2016. I woke up at 5 a.m. for work one morning. It had been snowing heavily much of the night. By the time I left, it was pretty deep, and there were at least 7 to 8 inches of snow on the road. As I was driving to work, I saw a car in the ditch and didn't think much about it. Looked vacated. Then another mile down the road, I saw this figure walking in the ditch. As I saw it, it looked like a lady who had clothing on from maybe anywhere between the 30s to the 50s. The figure also had some type of strange bright light in their hand that seemed to look like an LED, but it didn't seem like that was it. My first thought was that I should stop and ask if they need a ride, but then my intuition told me that something just didn't seem right. I looked for a couple of seconds and then kept going. The figure also didn't acknowledge me as I passed, which I thought was odd, as they may have needed help, especially in a snowstorm. As I thought about it later in the day, I realized that it was very strange because she would have passed a couple of farmhouses that this lady would have gone to. Since then, I've had a couple of other experiences throughout west central and southern Minnesota where I've seen dark figures at night on the road. It's almost as though they were shadows, but it was dark, and how could you see a shadow at night? I'm not sure if there are any other villagers who have had this experience like mine, but I appreciate your thoughts. Well, My logical thinking process says, well, maybe the person just lived, 100 yards down the road and didn't need a ride and just was going to walk into that next house. I don't know. Next letter. Hello, David. My name is blank. I live in Arizona. I have to explain these stories as best I can over email. Hopefully they can catch your attention or even have heard of similar stories. Just can't help but think in some way these incidents are connected to your 411 work. These incidents start with my dad when he was a teenager, early 20s, probably in the mid to late 80s. He told us the story of a non-human, non-animal sound in the sound, in his best words, not of this earth. It was a hunting trip amongst a group of 3 to 4, all camped on top of a hill called Pistol Hill, within a mile of a colossal cave in Vail, Arizona. His group went hunting, and after a long day, they decided to make camp on top of Pistol Hills with sleeping bags and a fire for comfort, as well as all was well until late at night when they began to hear rustling and movement in the bushes. They all began to worry and to feel a sense of dread and fear. Upon beginning to see what the noises were, rocks began to be thrown at them. They began to panic, not knowing what was going on. All the men began to yell and warn that they had weapons and were prepared to use them. First thing is, if something is throwing rocks at you, it has something like a hand, because nothing else can throw rocks. Rocks still being thrown at them as they began to shoot down the hill with 20-gauge birdshot and 22 long rifle. After the first shot rang out is when they heard the ungodly noise. The more they shot, the louder it became, and it was as if they were all around them. They shot all their ammo. Bad move. Then sat back till morning. Believe it lasted under an hour. Said easily over 100 rounds were shot off. Come morning, not a single sign of blood, tracks, no broken bushes, no sign of people or animals. Even if that was the case, that many rounds being shot downhill in all directions, no way nothing was hit. So I would say it's a dumb thing to do. Really dumb. First rule of being a hunter, you don't shoot at something you're not 100% what you're shooting at. So this isn't ethical, what they're doing. Fast forward to 2014. As kids, he would tell my friend and I these stories. So one night in the summertime, a group of 5 of us all went up to the hill. All of us about 18 years old. 2 were under 6 feet, muscular build, loud guys. We set out for the hill believing that there would be no reason to fear their stories. We reached the base of the hill, quickly ascending the hill, laughing, talking, joking. All of us expect to reach the peak of the hill. I was the second to last as I hit the top and turn around. The last friend comes sprinting as fast as he could into my arms in fear, screaming he heard it. Suddenly we all hear it. I too cannot explain these unearthly demonic noises. That's not good. I always appreciate the noise with the myth of a banshee. Sent chills to my spine. Writing this email, I get goosebumps. Just instilled so much fear and panic I dread with such a sense of not belonging there. No way to describe it. We had a single .40 caliber pistol with us. I instantly fire into the dark, and it was like I opened Pandora's box. It was like we were suddenly surrounded and engulfed with the noise, and all began to sprint down the hill. If it wasn't ammo, why was it not scared away by our voices, and how would that caliber pistol not instill fear? I cannot find words that give the noise justice. Almost over 20 years later, we have an identical experience. I've had another experience at the hill in the same region. I've had other unexplainable things happen. To save this from going any longer, I will save it for another email. Thanks again for all you do. Appreciate it. Friends, don't shoot into areas where you don't know where you're shooting to. A big thing about a hunter. You may see an animal that you wish to take, But if you don't see what's behind that animal, you shouldn't be shooting. Because when you shoot into nothingness, there could be a person down there. There could be a pet. Maybe somebody is bringing along, I don't know, a loud recorder to play some noise in the woods. Never shoot into nothingness. Next letter. I was just curious if you have attempted any FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests during COVID. I've sent in several to my local LA County government entities, and they keep responding that due to the state of emergency for COVID, they need more time. The state of emergency has in effect suspended all previous rules of law, and I'm pretty alarmed by it. Anyway, if you have any insight, or maybe you can cover FOIA requests in general, your experience with them is fascinating. I've done them in the past and never received much pushback. First of all, Freedom of Information Act requests only are applicable to the U.S. government, not state agencies, not local agencies, not municipalities. Now, some states and some localities have something similar to an FOIA, but the laws governing the Freedom of Information Act only cover and only reflect upon our U.S. government. I've done hundreds over the years. And a couple of things. If you're going to file a Freedom of Information Act request, try to do it online. That's number one. Why? I have sent Freedom of Information Act requests and letters, certified letters, signed upon receipt letters to agencies, including Yosemite National Park, who said, oh yeah, I guess that got to us, but I never got it. Our government knows how to play this game. And many people have no ethics. They have no integrity. They believe that that is their ground and you don't have any right to it. As sad as that sounds, that's the reality of some people, not all, not even the majority, but some people in our government. But do it online and you have a record of you sending it, the time it went out, and it's easy to copy and send another one a week later. Yeah, Freedom of Information Act requests, they're tough. And depending on the agency, you might never get a response. But keep with it. It's worth the attempt. Next letter. As a rule, I don't normally contact people out of the blue like this. However, with you, I feel compelled to do so. I've seen both your 411 missing documentary movies and was blown away with how professional they were done. Well, thank you. I admire your research, tenacity for the truth, and you have my utmost respect, my friend. I'm humbled. I'm a 59-year-old Canadian from British Columbia located near Sasquatch Provincial Park. So we're very familiar with the elusive creatures in these parts. I just recently retired from a local government Crown Corporation job, so I've spent many hours watching your documentaries and videos on your Can-Am Missing Project YouTube channel. Your Missing 411, The Hunted documentary really struck a chord with me, especially when Ron Moorhead said he saw a blue orb the size of a moon near his campsite. With my story, I just so happened to see a large red orb early one morning, 2004, when I was walking to my carpool pickup spot. On a rural street in Abbotsford, about 5:30 a.m., still dark, amongst a cedar grove of cluster trees, I walked down a pathway staircase to the street below where I would be picked up later. That's when I noticed the big red orb floating right above one of the tall cedar trees. It hung there for a moment, then floated across the other side of the road and became stationary above another tree on the other side. It was at this point the orb abruptly winked out. The whole thing only lasted 3 or 4 seconds, and I could easily have missed it. I thought this was odd, as I've never seen anything like this before. But another strange thing occurred to me the very next morning. Again, I'm walking to my carpool pickup spot. However, this time, before arriving there, I see a man wearing strange clothing under the exact same tree where I saw the red orb floating the day before. Keep in mind, it's early dawn and no one else is around. I was startled to see someone just standing there. He looked somewhat in a daze. Our eyes locked as I walked past him, not saying a word. I eventually got to my pickup spot, never knowing what became of him. He wasn't a bum, he just looked out of place to me. He wore a leather hat and tatty tan colored leather clothing. The clothes looked old, like they were from the 1800s, and from the expression in his eyes, he was just as startled to see me as I was him. What are the chances of seeing someone very strange under the exact same tree where I saw the large red orb the day prior? So this is where the Sasquatch connection comes into play. Let me prep this by saying that I never actually saw the man manifest himself into a red orb. So there's that. However, First Nations, indigenous people in these parts say Sasquatch can do that sort of thing. They can flip back and forth from the spirit world into the physical world. Now I'm wondering if certain humans can do exactly the same thing relating to my encounter. Let me stop there for a second. Nearly every tribe that I have worked with, spoken with, taken stories from, say the exact same thing about Bigfoot or Sasquatch. You're going to hear from certain, quote, experts in the Bigfoot field, oh, that can't be true. So they're discounting elders in the First Nations and Native American communities. I think that is obscene. Just because it doesn't fit with certain people's world or acceptance doesn't mean it's not happening. Go on. Like you, I think the Patterson-Gimlin film was 100% legit. It is. I've watched this and to ad nauseum. That said, as a kid, I remember seeing a flash just before the film terminated. And now, even after all these years, the film analysis and blown-up video clips, I cannot find a version where the last few frames where the flash occurred. Dave, do you know anything about this so-called flash on the film? Nope, never saw it. Because I believe it could relate to Bigfoot leaving the physical realm into the spiritual realm. This may also explain why Ron Moorhead and I have seen strange orbs in the sky. On another note, I just recently watched your Canon Project YouTube video entitled The Factual News, January 28th, 2022. I just wanted to say you're 100% connected and correct about China getting their tentacles into North America in 2020. I watched a British ITV documentary entitled Undercover, Inside China's Digital Gulag. It got all kinds of awards as the documentary went undercover, exposing how Chinese big tech companies have created the world's most sophisticated surveillance state against the Uyghur people. Thing is, the documentary goes on to say that the surveillance technology will one day be worldwide with all data going back to communist China. Scary stuff. Anyway, if you haven't seen this documentary, I urge you to research it. It can be hard to find, but please try. Again, it's called China's Digital Gulag. Worth watching. I look forward to hearing from you and watching your videos. Well, I appreciated your letter. And that area of British Columbia, I have spent many days. It is, how could I say this? Gorgeous, intriguing, unusual, and bizarre. Something about southern British Columbia specifically, a lot going on there. One of these days, if the border ever opens up and they allow people with natural immunity who are not vaccinated across the border again, I'm going to go there and I'll film segments for you. There's a There's a First Nations friend I have in southern British Columbia who's a great person. And he and I have gone into some backcountry areas. He's escorted us in. He knows it. Got a wife and a son. Really a great guy. I won't name him because he gets harassed, but he's 100% legit, let's say. 100%. He's proven himself to me. Next story. Hey Dave, listened and read a lot of your stuff. I'm a pilot in the Navy. Very discerning person. Anyways, in my readings of other topics, I've come across a fact in physics known as the observer effect. Basically in physics, if a particle isn't being observed, it isn't actually in a definite position. Rather, it is in a waveform and in a multitude of possible positions until it's observed, and then the wave function collapses and the particle assumes a definite position. Now, I believe this may somehow tie into the reason people go missing, but only when separated from other people. I believe this has to do with there being no other observer present. Many physicists now seriously believe that we may be living in a simulation because of the way our reality operates with the particles, and everything as I described is how a computer works. It doesn't render things except what is necessary for the observer to see in its field of view. I seriously think there is something to this in the missing people. Exactly what? I do not know. Well, there's that old philosophical statement about if you aren't there and you don't see it and you don't hear it, are there sounds in the woods? If a tree falls and nobody's around, does it make any sounds? Now going backwards from this letter, where the man saw the person dressed in leather, looked out a place near a location where he saw an orb. So my question comes in. We've talked about portals before. Nobody really knows what a portal looks like per se. But people have claimed that they've gone into one. But they don't know what the outside of it looks like when they're inside. So, what if that red orb actually contained a person and that was their portal? And as this man said, what if there was a simulation inside of something, an area that they didn't understand? And what if that portal, or what if that orb flies around and it's almost like a research facility that moves, and the people that own that research facility or that orb are studying you while you're inside of it. And they're keeping you comfortable and they're keeping you alive by placing you in a simulation that looks somewhat familiar, but you really don't know. And then when they're done with you, they put you on the ground in an area where you could get home. I know that's pretty wild thinking, but I do believe that we need to start looking further outside that box to get answers on this. I've told you before that while I research missing people, I come across articles that are just fascinating. And some of them I've kept to myself over the years, and I thought I'd read you a few that I've come across just in the last couple of years. This is from January 19th, 1890. The title is Bears and Men Dead Together. On Christmas morning, this is from the Philadelphia Times, by the way, January 19th, 1890. Bears and Men Dead Together. On Christmas morning, George Hayes and Albert Waldrop, colored, left their homes near Northport, Alabama to go bear hunting down the Warrior River bottoms some 18 miles away. They carried shotguns and 2 dogs, well trained for coon and bear hunting. Bears had been numerous in the bottoms this winter, and with both men were experienced hunters, they left home confident of a successful hunt. They carried enough provisions to last them 3 days and told their families they would return at the expiration of that time. A week passed and nothing was heard from the 2 hunters. Their families and friends were surprised, and when Winthrop's dog came home alone, the surprise deepened into alarm. A searching party was organized and started for the river bottoms. They searched for 2 days without finding any trace of the hunters. A larger search party was organized, and the dead bodies of the missing hunters were found in a small ravine half a mile from the Warrior River. Both had been killed in a fight with a family of black bears. In a small cave, the bears had their den, and the fight took place at the entrance of this cave. 3 cubs and 2 old bears lay dead on the ground near the bodies of the hunters. Hayes' body, swollen and disfigured, lay in the grasp of the larger of the 2 old bears, and it was evident that the 2 had died together. A knife carried by Hayes was buried in the body of the bear. Waldrop's flesh was torn in many places, and he had evidently died from loss of blood. The young bears had been shot, and it was evident that they had taken no part in the fight to the death. Hayes' dog lay dead close beside its master. It had probably been killed before the hunters arrived at the scene. The 2 old bears were the largest ever seen in that locality, where bears had been plentiful for many years. Pretty weird story. Very strange story. Don't know what to say about it. When I read it, some things didn't seem right. First of all, when a bear has a couple cubs, they keep those cubs away from male bears. Male bears like to kill the cubs. A lot of people don't understand why. As long as the female bear has the cubs around, it won't go into a cycle to attract male bears. If they killed the cubs, then that female will go into cycle. And somehow nature has made those bears aware of that. It's weird. Next story that I found that is weird. This is from the Woodson Democrat in Kansas, November 25th, 1887. The headline, 25 hunters missing in a burning swamp. Destructive fires in several places. Headline, Memphis, Tennessee. Forest fires continue to rage in this section and damage sustained is becoming serious. Several gin houses in Crittenden County, Arkansas, and in the counties of Mississippi, which border the river, have been burned, but it is impossible to gather definite details of the loss, it being so widespread that an estimate cannot be given. Steamers cannot run at night owing to the dense smoke which prevails from the Vicksburg, Mississippi, to a point 150 miles above Memphis, a total distance of 650 miles. Fires are burning everywhere within this territory, and there is no immediate prospect of rain. Travel by rail is absolutely obstructed from these causes. Several trestles on the Kansas City Road have been destroyed, and communications with St. Louis is now made via Forest City, Arkansas. Never before in the history of the country have there been such widespread conflagrations, and the loss to farmers will be very heavy. The windstorm which prevailed Saturday and Saturday night must have been destructive to many dwellings and outhouses of planters, especially in the counties to the west of Memphis in Arkansas. But owing to the secluded country and the lack of telegraph facilities, it'll be difficult for several days before the true condition of affairs is learned. The same reports come from every quarter of fires that the loss is being sustained. The only escape that is promised will come from rain, and nearly all the churches' prayers were offered Sunday, and the showers might fall in the destructive sense. What's weird about that is we rarely hear about destructive fires from over 100 years ago. We tend to think it's something caused by our current climate. No, it's been happening for centuries and centuries. I wanted to read that to you to let you know these have been going on for years. So, I have 3 pretty darn interesting missing person cases for you. First one. This is Teresa Baciocho, 38 years old. Lived in San Francisco, October 10th, 1935. In that previous year, Teresa had lost her husband and her 17-year-old son. I saw the post that the husband did die in months prior to this incident. Now it was just Teresa and her 12-year-old son named Dari, D-A-R-I. The family lived at 2935 Folsom Street in San Francisco in 1936. She had a cousin that lived way up in Northern California. And she decided to visit him and his wife. So her and Dari made the trip from San Francisco past Point Reyes National Park, a cluster zone of missing people, and she made it to the Pronsolino residence. My diagrams and my maps are across the room. Hold 1 second and let me get them for you. I was not ready for this. Back again. Sorry about that. So, the Pronsolinos owned a ranch. They raised cows. So, when Teresa went, her and her son, they had kids. Son stayed at the home with the other kids. Teresa took a walk with Mrs. Pronsolino. Now, to give you a feeling for where this is at, this is San Francisco right here, right down here, right in this area. This is San Rafael. This is Point Reyes National Park, where there's a cluster of missing people. She was right here, Signal Ridge. So they took off on this walk, looked for cows. Mrs. Pronsolino and her sat down about a mile from the residence. They were talking, and Mrs. Pronsolino told Teresa, hey, Teresa was 38 years old. I'll be right back. Let me go right around the ridge here and look for some cows. A couple of minutes later, she comes back and Teresa's gone. Mrs. Pronsolino thought, well, maybe my cousin took a walk somewhere, maybe decided to walk back. Well, she started to walk back towards the residence, herding the cows back to the home. When she looked around and saw the road, and Mrs. Pronsolino was quite a ways ahead of her on the road going around a bend. She didn't think anything about it. She was going the right direction. She gets back to the residence. Teresa's not there. So her and her husband start looking around the property, can't find her, and they call the sheriff. The sheriff calls 50 CCC, California Conservation Corps members that are staying at a place called Russian Gulch right on the water, right on the Pacific Ocean. Slight side note here. I know Russian Gulch State Park really, really well. I've been there many times. A lot of people don't know, but I've been a certified scuba diver since I was 14. I was a pretty good swimmer. I was a lifeguard when I was young. And we used to go to Russian Gulch, spend the weekend, and go skin diving off the coast there for abalone. And there's nothing better than get the abalone, cook them up right there on the beach. Oh my gosh. I miss those days. But anyhow, the sheriff gets these 50 CCC members. They start looking for Teresa. And they search for 5 days. They find somebody who was driving down that road she was walking on, because she flagged down this man and said, hey, can you help me? I need to get back. And he goes, I'm just going down the road right here, and I'm really not going that direction, but it's 10 miles that way, another way. Supposedly, she'd walked 10 miles the wrong direction. So the sheriff hears this, puts all of his resources into that area, finds a couple footprints, but that's it. And for her to get to that place, she had to go through an immense amount of forest. But she was walking right into this very deep canyon off the road. Quoting the sheriff, it is utterly impossible to walk into these woods, into this brush, and to not tear your clothing and leave pieces behind. And he said, we didn't find any tracks. We didn't find any clothing. We have no idea where she is. They gave up the search. Now imagine this. It's 1936. Now Dari, who's 12 years old, has lost his dad, has lost his 17-year-old brother, and now loses his mom. Herding cows, she gets lost. No tracks. Right next to the ocean, right near a cluster. It's about 50 miles away from Point Reyes. Now, here's where my mind goes on this. Was she somehow drawn to that cousin's house? Was this supposed to happen? That point of separation was when Mrs. Pronsolino goes to look for the cows. Was that somehow involved? Then the other thing that's important to me is that I've had many incidents of missing people where they were never found when they went to look for cows. Yeah, I know it sounds bizarre, but it's true. And then Dari, the lone survivor at 12 years old. How could that boy not be harmed mentally from the loss of his family over a 1-year period? I can't imagine that. What was the point, or is there a point in our world simulation of putting a young boy through that amount of pain? It was said in many of these stories that Teresa was in despair and depressed, which is why she went up to see her cousin. But the point of her flagging down a car and asking for assistance shows that she wasn't trying to harm herself. She was never found. Yeah. Now another story that you might find similarities. This is George McLomish, 55 years old. It's believed that she went missing August 16th or August 17th, 1927, in the Clear Lake district north of Kingston, Ontario. She was married to George, who was 71. They ran a ranch in a very rural, thick, lush, swampy area of Ontario. Now on Saturday, August 16th, the husband had to go to Kingston over a medical issue that he had. Point of separation. So while he was at the doctor, when he got done, he couldn't return to his ranch because of a horrific thunderstorm that inundated that area. It was in all the news articles for that time. So he stayed. He came home late Sunday. His wife was gone. She left a message saying that she went out to herd the cows. They lived in a location called Hardwood Bay. Now, Hardwood Bay, in the articles, they stated it was on Clear Lake, north of Kingston. That would be incorrect. Hardwood Bay would be on Devil's Lake, north of Kingston. So here is Big Clear Lake, north of Kingston. This is Devil's Lake. Hardwood Bay is on Devil's Lake. For you who follow me, this may mean something. For you who don't follow me, let me explain. I wrote a book called The Devil's in the Detail. Yeah, it's a play on words, but it also has meaning. Many of the cases I've written about over the years, the name devil or some offshoot of devil plays into the disappearance, the location. Now, when George comes home after being at the physician, finds the note, looks around, calls for his wife, but isn't positive whether his wife went missing on Saturday or Sunday. Now, he calls the local sheriff, and they respond with RCMP and Kingston police searchers. Now, the RCMP wasn't reported to them until the 19th of August because George was looking for his wife himself and didn't want to raise an alarm if he didn't have to. But 100 searchers looked for 3 days in thick vegetation. They found tracks of hers very near the residence, as would be normal, but nothing when they went out looking. Very rugged and swampy, no tracks, water everywhere. The nights in this area got extremely cold, and the article said that. In Devil's Lake. Point of separation, extremely cold weather for August. The weather of the thunderstorm. Looking for cows. No tracks. Devil's Lake. Friends, the similarities in some of these stories are pretty phenomenal. And you just have to think about what's going on. Now, I tend to think, well, why cows? Well, I think the biggest issue to me is, let's think about cattle mutilations. There has never been a direct line between missing people and cattle mutilations. But in my stories where people go missing when they're looking for cows, I find fascinating. Is there some association there? Whoever is mutilating the cows, are they smart enough to understand that they shouldn't be taking people in the same area that they're doing the cow thing because we're smart enough to put this together? I don't know. I don't know. The next story. May 21st, 1978. Otter Lake, Quebec. It involves a man named John Malcolm Davis. Get a good look at John. Very, very smart man. He was an attorney. He ran his own practice. He was a retired attorney. He and his family lived in London, Ontario. Now, he's a member of a fishing club at Otter Lake in Quebec for over 30 years. He had gone to Otter Lake ever since he was a teenager. He was now 56 years old. He had to sell his attorney practice because he had a very strange virus in his brain. Very similar to Alzheimer's, but it was a virus in the brain that caused him to lose short-term memory, very similar to Alzheimer's and dementia, but not that. But he knew this area around Otter Lake like you and I know our backyards, because he'd gone there so many times fishing. And it was a fishing camp that he had bought into, and he had friends there. And they left on May 20th to go up to Otter Lake and to go fishing. All of his friends, 4 of them and him, were staying in the same cabin. Fishermen like to get up early because that's when the fishing tends to be the best, and late at night or late in the afternoon. And on May 21st, they were all taking a nap. John apparently got up and left. Nobody heard him leave. Nobody saw him leave. Now, he left behind his wallet and his fishing poles. Now, some of you might say, oh, that's weird. No, it's not weird. When I go fishing, when I go places, oftentimes I don't take my wallet. I'll put my fishing license in my pocket, but I leave my wallet behind, because if I'm going cross country or going through rough terrain and you lose your wallet, chances of finding it are almost nil. So, yeah. And if he wasn't going fishing in the middle of the day, I understand that, because good fishermen know that fishing isn't good in the middle of the day. So he probably just went to take a walk, let's say. That's my guess. So he went to take this walk. His friends wake up, he's not there. They start looking for him. And they can't find him. Now, where is this? So here's a map. The point of the map is I want you to notice all of the water around this area. They're on a place called Farrell Lake, just north of Otter Lake. And the cabin was right near there, and that's where they focused the search. So the friends call RCMP and Quebec police. Quebec responds immediately with 2 helicopters. Right away. Hey, I'm telling you, that's impressive. Usually most jurisdictions only have 1 in the sky. Well, they had 2, and they sent them both. And that makes their local jurisdiction without the availability of that resource. To me, that's impressive. Quebec also sent 4 canine teams. And they got there, and peculiarly, they could not find any tracks of John in that area. Canines couldn't pick up a scent leaving the cabin. And they searched for 7 days. John's son, Brian, got there and helped coordinate part of the search, explain the condition with his dad. The wife also came. Now, they said that John was sufficient to fish, move around, and be in that area where they were because of his long-term memory of where he was. But after 7 days, they didn't find anything, and a decision had to be made, and they terminated the search. Well, Quebec police, about a month later, they get a dog, a new canine, trained in the USA, that they talked a lot about. Supposedly this dog was phenomenal. It had found many people. It was specially trained. It could find deceased people, cadavers from miles away. So on June 22nd, they bring up this dog, and it searched for 3 days. It didn't find anything. Now, if the wind's blowing from a certain direction, a dog can figure it out and track that cadaver sometimes for miles and miles. Cadaver meaning a dead body. Dead body puts out odors. If you've never smelled it, you will not forget it. It's horrific. But if you're miles away, you won't smell it. But again, a dog's nose is so sensitive. And their hearing is so much better than ours that they could come up with things that would just boggle your mind. Well, this dog didn't find anything, which is very peculiar. So I look at the John Davis disappearance in a multitude of ways. First of all, 5 different canine teams couldn't find him. He disappeared right next to a lake around miles and miles of water. He had a very strange disability with a virus on his brain and no tracks. People have asked me many times, are there many fishermen that have gone missing that you've done research on? In the grand work I've done on thousands of cases, it's pretty rare that fishermen go missing. It happens, but it's pretty rare. Now, some people may say, well, John maybe wanted to take his life because his condition was that bad. Possible, I guess. But from the articles that I read and the conversation that his son and his wife had with searchers, it didn't sound like the condition was that debilitating. But you got to remember something. If it was that bad, and his thinking wasn't that clear, then why couldn't the canines find him? Why couldn't the trackers that were on scene track him? That just doesn't make sense to me. So the thought that he tried to take his life and disappear into nothingness out there, I don't buy it. I think something really unusual happened here. What, I don't know. But if you understand our profile points, and then one of the things on this case that I think is important is I've read hundreds of cases of people who have claimed abduction over the years. And one of the unusual things is that they've said that as they're being removed from a room of people, they're yelling and screaming and nobody hears them or nobody wakes up. It's almost like they're in a trance or they're drugged because they're not responding. It's hard for the people to understand. Is that what happened in John's case? I'm just speaking outside the box. I have no idea. But for nobody to hear him leave, for nobody to see him leave, I think is odd. For them not to find tracks in the area, odd. But then again, all these cases are odd. So that's John Malcolm Davis, 56 years old, May 21st, 1978, Otter in Farrell Lake, Quebec. So just in review, the Bociocco case and the McLomish case, where the people were herding cows, or with others who were herding cows. I think those are odd. And for Teresa Baciocho to disappear in an area where there were roads, there were people, for her not to be found, I think is really strange. Now, I talked just briefly about the Point Reyes cluster of missing people that I've written about. There have been some very strange cases around Point Reyes, right on the ocean. Now, these weren't people that were in the ocean. They were just right next to the ocean. If you've never been to Point Reyes, it's an hour drive max from San Francisco if you're ever vacationing there. It's right on the coast. It's gorgeous. Gorgeous views. And there's a small city near Point Reyes on the north side of the Golden Gate Bridge called Sausalito that I would tell you to go to. It's a very cute little city. Some really good restaurants. Very safe. But anyhow, those are the 3 cases today, plus the cases I read to you that I've done some research on. Remember, if we're heading into spring, get a personal locator beacon for family members. Always check the weather before you go out to hike. Love your family. Do something friendly and caring for someone you don't know. If you're going to the store, hold the door open, be pleasant, smile. We're in some tough times. A smile means a lot. A friendly face means a lot. It doesn't cost anything. Please make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'm still getting hundreds of messages that people aren't subscribed. It means a lot if you are. Trust me. And for you to play this video in its length means a lot to me. Playing it multiple times means a lot to me. And putting it on your social media is helpful. Thank you for being here. Be safe. And hopefully I'll see you soon. Paulides out.